So Steve, welcome to Slovenia.
Thank you.
We were waiting for you a long time now. We heard the things that you have recorded already, the songs for the new record.
Yeah,
And I know that you're hearing thousands of questions a day, probably about that.
that's fine.
Could you share something with us and our audience?
We work very slowly as a band. We all of us have normal regular jobs, or normal professional obligations and families and stuff. So we don't have very much time to work on the band. So it takes us a long time to do anything. You know, a normal band where everyone is working on the band more regularly, you might be able to rehearse two or three times a week. And for us, we can only rehearse maybe 2 or 3 times in a span of maybe 4 or 5 months.
No.
You know, so it's much more difficult for us to write songs and to get them rehearsed and get them ready to record. It just takes a lot longer. It's probably in the number of hours that we spend on it, it's probably very similar to other bands, but it's just spread out over the calendar in a much longer period. So we've been working on new songs for a new album for about 6 years or 7 years, and you know, little by little things get finished, and I think we're now finished with an album.
And also you recorded the album
Yeah,
by yourself?
we recorded it in Chicago at the
Do
studio.
you know maybe some expectations when it will come out or something like that, or you don't bother with that?
We don't know because the label that we use, Touch and Go Records, it's no longer like a full-scale record label. They no longer have like a full roster of artists, and they don't have a regular schedule. So we're just going to go through the process, you know, like we have to decide on artwork and get the artwork together and then start the manufacturing process. And when it's done, it's done.
Okay, so no pressure for you or the label?
Yeah.
Okay.
It seems like it should be done before the end of 2013. It seems like it should be done by then, but I don't know.
So
no promises.
The band's work is done for now.
Yeah.
They're playing with Obits.
Okay.
You know them maybe?
Yeah.
So we heard that Albini was one of your favorite bands.
Yeah,
That's
they're
true.
old friends. The people in Albini, we've known them for probably 20 years, you know, and they're great friends. I've worked on a lot of their records, I think all of their records, and we get along really well with them. We have done tours with them, we've traveled with them. We've set shows up for them and they've set shows up for us. So very, very friendly relationship.
The first thing that comes in mind in collaboration with the band,
Well,
what's wrong?
I work with a lot of different kinds of bands. Like some bands have a very clear aesthetic idea of what they want their music to sound like. Like a band like Neurosis, for example. Like they have in their view of their music, they see everything fairly completely.
From the sound, from the arrangements, everything.
The visual presentation, the sound, the arrangement of the instruments, everything is pretty much figured out in advance. And so for a band like that, my job is relatively simple. I just have to make a recording and not make any mistakes.
Yeah.
You know? There are other bands that are more experimental, where when they get into the studio, they want to try different arrangements, different instruments, different sounds. I've done a lot of recording with the Breeders. Kim Deal from the Breeders is a really creative person, and she will often have, you know, many different ideas about any song, and she'll want to try everything. And once she's tried everything, then she can decide what she likes. And so that process takes more time, it's more involved, but, you know, still, I mean, I'm doing a job that's, what I'm doing is kind of similar in that I'm trying to make a recording of something, but the process is more complicated with an artist like that.
So you're still dealing just with technical engineering stuff? Or
Pretty much. I mean, there are some embedded in the idea of the technical stuff. There is some sound quality and some aesthetic associated with it. So, like if you use this microphone, you'll have one kind of sound quality, and that can make the music sound either more clinical or more romantic or something like that, depending on the choices that you make. So there is a little bit of artistic element to it, but for the most part, I would say 90% is a technical job. You know.
I really like the idea that, as far as I know, you don't like to work with the Pro Tools. And
Yeah, I don't even know how to turn it on.
so okay,
We have, I mean, at our studio, we have Pro Tools and we have Digital Performer and we have digital systems, but I don't use them in my work, and the bands that I work with don't require it. So I've never learned how to use it.
So it's great. In the beginning, you can say, okay, you're doing everything on the magnetic tape, and so you don't mess around with stuff, because when you record it, it's like it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean, it requires a little bit more attention before recording. When you're doing stuff digitally, you can record and then manipulate it afterwards very easily. In the analog domain, you can still manipulate it. It's just not as easy. So you don't do it automatically. You try to make the recording of something that's already basically basically the way you want it, and then what manipulation you do after the fact is going to be on a much smaller scale and very specific elements. You're going to change some small things about some small things. In digital sessions, the digital sessions that I have observed, it seems as though every element goes through a rigorous process of being chopped and changed and manipulated and
degraded.
And to me, that's just a very tiring process. I don't think I would enjoy that.
So who makes you a coffee in the studio? I heard that you like special kind of.
We have a very nice espresso machine in the studio. We just had a coffee shop in town was upgrading their espresso machine, so they sold us their old one, and so now we have a very nice espresso machine. And I'm pretty good, but there are other guys that work at the studio who are a little bit more experienced than me.
So like interns or something?
There are some interns, but also there are some employees that have a very good touch with the coffee machine. So.
You have to be very careful with the stuff. So you take any interns maybe?
Sure. I mean, if you want, if you're interested, just call the studio. I mean, the studio number is available on the internet, and you can call and talk to me or talk to the studio manager.
The last question.
Okay.
What's the last thing that you made for dinner?
Before I left, I made what was it? I made a really nice risotto. I made a really nice risotto out of stock.
Your own stock?
Yeah, the stock has been. It's been kind of a project of mine. I've been working on this stock for a couple of weeks. It started with some chicken bones and some vegetables, but then I kept adding more and more to it. And every time you take some out, you add some water and you throw something else in. And in the end, it ends up being it's really nice, really very complicated flavor. It's sort of like the whole encyclopedia of our kitchen is in that. Yeah, I don't like to just fuck around at random. I'll try experiments.
Keep focus.
Yeah, I'll try experiments. I think experimenting is a very important part of a learning process. But the key is that you're supposed to be learning something when you're experimenting. If you're just experimenting at random, and then the next time that situation comes up, you've forgotten all of the results of your experiments, then you haven't made any progress. But if you experiment and then you make note of the results, like, this works really well when I do this, then you have another tool, then you have another way to approach a problem. So I think experimenting is very important, but I think it needs to be experimenting with a kind of a rigorous mentality. You
Yeah.
can't just. I'm not a big fan of just sort of free form fucking around.
Yes.
You know?
Okay, we are still in the food business.
Okay.
I brought you some.
Vegeta.
Yeah,
Yeah, I use
so,
this all the time. Yeah, it's very popular in Chicago.
Really?
Yeah, there's a big Eastern European community in Chicago.
And they sell things.
This is available in every supermarket.
Oh,
And,
oh, fuck.
it's really great. I
Didn't
love
know.
it though. Yeah,
Cool.
It's very useful for starting a stock or for
Yeah.
you know, like if you're making a sauce and it's a little boring, you throw a little bit.
Yeah, that's it's like a folklore here, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Everything, because this guy,
Yeah.
the show was about cooking, and he did 15 minutes meals and something like that on national television. And in the end, it was like Vegeta was supporting the show, and they ended up always with 2 spoons of Vegeta on everything, you know. And so it's like a folklore here. So it's-
Cool. Excellent. Thank you.
Steve, thanks very much.
Oh, no problem.
Really great to meet you and to share some thoughts.
No problem.
Thanks.
He's also good. He have a studio at home, and he also run a good label.
Ah,
Yeah, it's called God by this Mask. Actually, it's okay.
well, good luck.
Good.
Thank you.
Steve, can I ask you for just one favor?
Sure. Yeah.
Great. Do you sign?
Sure. Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
I don't have a pen though.
I have it. Okay. So wherever you like, it's cool. I'm prepared. Great. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Great. Have a nice show.
Oh, thank you.
And stay in Slovenia.
Yeah, I think we're